Welcome to the Stupid Fans Club, folks. I am your host, Shaan Donn, and welcome to the club. Listen, on this show, we talk nothing but sports, and this is specifically the college football edition. So, we will be talking about the latest and greatest in the college football world. And if you are not already subscribed, please make sure you do so. We really appreciate the support. We are exclusively on YouTube, but we do post clips on Instagram and TikTok. So be sure to follow us there. It should be down there below for you. So again, we truly appreciate the support. And if you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and follow us on our socials. Good week of college football. We got a few things to go over, and I've been super excited, as you can tell behind me. to go over this episode. So we'll get to the game recaps as always. We'll touch on the new top 25. We have a new number one in the building, and then we'll look forward into the big games, the must-see TV games of this weekend. So we'll jump right into it. You know exactly where we're starting. Georgia, Texas. Georgia hands Texas their very first loss of the season, 30-15. And man, what a game. I think Georgia pretty much controlled the game. It was surprising, and to know why it was surprising, you have to know the context of what the feel was leading up to the game. As we know, Texas hadn't really shown any flaws, any areas of weakness. And so you're coming into that game and just feeling like Texas has all this momentum. Any team that is inferior to them, they crush them. And so they're coming off that big Red River rivalry game. And, you know, they just look dominant all season. And then you got Georgia, on the other hand, who has been like this. They, you know, it's like you see in 2 and 3 different versions of Georgia in one game. We're talking about a Georgia who was up 31-10 against Mississippi State, and then ends up winning it 41-31. And it took a 4th and goal for them to kind of get back to a comfortable lead. We're talking about a Georgia who beat Kentucky by 1 point, a team that was down 28-0 in the first half. But at the same time, that same team came back to take a lead after a 28-point deficit and was able to pull out a tough SEC win on the road against Kentucky. So you've just seen so many different versions of Georgia, and, you know, on the heels of that game against Mississippi State and just how that ended, even though the masses weren't talking about it. I feel like I was one of the only people in the true Georgia fans who watched the whole game and really saw the red flags there. You know, we were kind of the only ones like, what's going on? But nonetheless, the momentum was all on Texas's side. So for Georgia to come out and play the way they did was surprising. And Kirby kind of touched on it after the game and saying, like, you know, they got embarrassed the week before against Mississippi State. Won the game, you know, but they won by 10 points. Defense was giving up huge plays, and we're talking about the worst team in the SEC. And so, you know, they had their attention, and Georgia absolutely answered the bell. Their defense completely, that front line overwhelmed Texas's offensive line. One of the big things I pointed out was you can't give Quinn Ewers all day. If you just let him sit back and take a nap in that pocket, he's going to torch you. And that's, you know, good passing quarterbacks. That's what they want. If they get a nice clean pocket, you know, they're going to have those weapons who will eventually get open. So I thought they did a great job all night, just overwhelming that offensive line and getting pressure on Quinn Ewers. And then Trevor Etienne was absolutely amazing. I thought he was the player of the game for us. Really carried that offense, and you know, on the road and just a tough environment, man. If you can run the football, that changes so much. man, it's like your safety blanket out there. So he showed up big time. And if you've been watching, you know I've been calling for them to feed Trevor Etienne. It's almost like Georgia didn't realize who they had as a running back. Like, he is a premier running back in college football, and we were being a pass first team. I even think on their first drive, it was all passes. We got the ball first, and we came out and threw it on all three down. I'm like, man, let's establish the run. It's not like we have a bum back there. And Nate Frazier, I've been raving about him all year. I think he needs more touches as well. I think we have a good running game, and Georgia is known for that. So, you know, we do have a good quarterback. Um, and we'll talk about that, because I hear people now saying, "Do we really?" But you know, I think that was a great coming out party, and hopefully opens up the eyes for Mike Bobo and Georgia's coaching staff to say, give him the ball more. He's a really, really good running back. So great game for Trevor Etienne. Georgia jumped out to a big 20-0 lead, which was again shocking. This was set up. I think the exact words were used as a heavyweight boxing match, and that's what it felt like coming into the game. But pretty quickly, it was a one-sided show, and it looked like Georgia was gonna open it up here. But then the offense kind of went cold, I believe, going into halftime. So we had a few possessions just before halftime where we kind of just went flat. And it's like, you're letting Texas hang around. You're letting them hang around. Carson Beck, two big picks early in that game. Ended up with 3 on the night, but it was a great start, but I didn't like how it felt a little cold and flat going into halftime. So I was anticipating, and I think that's what happens with good teams. Eventually they're gonna turn it on, and our defense was playing so great that it's like, man, you gotta help them out offensively. Like, it's only so many times they're gonna keep stopping them from scoring or getting in a good field position. Like, eventually something is gonna break through, and that's what you started to feel. Texas went on their run, and that momentum started to get a little crazy. We're in a hostile environment out there in Austin, and the fans started getting back into it. Carson Beck wasn't playing his best, so it got a little tight there. But Georgia again answered the bell. Carson Beck, we'll get into him as well, but I guess we can say he played poorly again. But he has a knack of responding when, like, his back is against the wall. Like, he can play poorly all game, and I guess that speaks to his resilient mindset, his next play mindset mentality. But when we were backed up on their goal line and they had cut it to about a 1 possession game or something, and it was like, all right, if we don't do something here, we're going to be in trouble. And we went all the way down the field and I believe scored a touchdown there, which completely flipped the momentum and leveled it out a lot more, gave us some breathing room again. But that was huge for Georgia. And then obviously we just ended up holding the lead and pulling away. The question I have about Texas is, was the moment too big? I heard someone talk about how Georgia was the team that was already battle tested this year. They've already played Alabama on the road. They already went to Kentucky and played a tough, just phone booth football game and won by. Opened up the season against Clemson, who looks fantastic, by the way. And so Georgia has been through the mud. Texas hasn't played that much competition. I think if you look at their schedule right now, the two that stand out the most will probably be that Michigan game and their game, the Red River rivalry game against Oklahoma. And those teams, all due respect to them, they're just not there this year. They have quarterback problems. Oklahoma has a good defense, but their offense is super injured, one dimensional. Got a true freshman at quarterback, but they're just not there this year. Same thing with Michigan, just quarterback issues. They're just ill-equipped to face a team like Texas. So I do think them not being battle tested just yet, or this being their first matchup, did show in this game. And also think we got to remember this is their first year in the SEC. It is a different thing. Like you look at the Big 10, Big 12, even the old ACC, like when Clemson was on their run, it was always like, let's see if they can be beat in their bowl game or in the championship. Let's see if they can be beat later in the season against, maybe this team could upset them. But for the most part, these teams were going undefeated. Ohio State and Michigan, it was just undefeated all year until they play each other, and then we'll see. Like, that's how a lot of these conferences are. In the SEC, again, referencing back to that Georgia-Kentucky game, Kentucky versus Ole Miss, Alabama versus South Carolina. These teams that are, again, these mid-tier teams that I've talked about before, they are going to challenge you in the SEC, right? So this is not your typical conference. And Georgia, even though it feels like maybe it's a down year for them, maybe they don't have the same weapons, they don't. You can't come in there thinking that this is going to be a cakewalk. And even though you didn't know what to expect from Georgia, that Georgia-Alabama thing, that is like brothers fighting. Like you see Alabama go up 28-0 and you're another team and just look over like, oh man, if Alabama can do that to Georgia, oh man, wait till we get our hands on them. No. that there is something different. That's personal, right? That's some deep rooted, just they gotta fight it out. Everybody else, no, it's not gonna go like that. So again, I just think that this is new for Texas. They're in a new conference, and although they've looked great this year, the SEC is different, and really this was their first test of the season. We haven't seen them play a true threat at the caliber of Georgia so far, and it's a bit underwhelming. I mean, it was night and day from what we've seen. There's nothing to really lean on. Oh, such and such was hurt, or oh, it was a road game. It was like, I think they just were overmatched. That offensive line could not handle Georgia's pressure. Quinn Ewers couldn't get any time. He's not mobile. And even down outside of the players, I thought the benching of Quinn Ewers was peculiar. Like, I think he's done a fantastic job dealing with a player like Arch Manning being your backup. He almost took them to the national championship last year. And so he knows how to show up in big games. And he knows how to play under pressure. He's under the most pressure you can have as a starting quarterback, and he seemed to always lead them. And so it felt like, yes, they were down 20-0 early, and you couldn't get anything going really, but to give up on them that quickly just felt peculiar. It was like he's done, dated back to last season. He had a brilliant run last season and got you off to an undefeated start this season. And then the moment things look a little shaky in your first true test, you take him out the game and put Arch Manning in. It's like, man, and I think it's of the flow of the game too, because again, Georgia was getting a lot of pressure on him, and he's just not a mobile quarterback. That's not who he is. And so you maybe are trying to throw another option at them, like let's get somebody in there who can maybe create a spark with their legs, and the play is not dead as soon as the offensive line breaks down, because they were clearly overmatched. So I get it, but I just thought it was premature, and I thought kind of showed their inexperience in big games. Like, if that's your quarterback, that's your quarterback. Adjust, put him in positions to maybe get the ball out quicker, but to take him out, like I didn't watch the game and think like he is just playing terrible. And I don't even think you do that for you give your starting quarterback, a little more room for error. Like, I just really thought that was premature, but I'm not I heard people saying it is time to put Arch Manning in. And then then you try to put him back into the game after that, after you benched him, and now he's probably questioning himself. And man, I just thought Texas was kind of, not only the players, I thought they all showed maybe the moment just being too big for them at this moment. I do think this is something they can learn from now. And, obviously their season is not over, but that was probably a learning lesson for them. And maybe they're welcome to the SEC moment, because again, no one was picking Georgia to win this game. I had huge concerns coming into this game, and, it had its moments, but Georgia controlled the football game for the most part. And we got to talk about that bizarre penalty call where they called holding on the interception by Texas, where the guy returned it all the way back into the red zone around their 9 or so. And they called it back, said it was holding. The fans, the coaches, the players threw a temper tantrum, and started throwing a bunch of bottles on the field, which caused the delay. And then the refs reversed the call. And you could see Kirby over there losing his mind on the refs. And I thought this reminded me a lot of the Miami Virginia Tech Hail Mary call, and just that whole ending. It was once again a call that it was like, where did you get that from? How did you see that? Because it wasn't holding. Like, and this is a Georgia fan saying this. The guy definitely wasn't holding him. So ultimately, I know there are people who say they made the right call as long as you get it right. But no, because the call on the field matters, and it wasn't a reviewable play. This clearly showed that the fans throwing bottles on the field caused them to change that call, because this is what they called. The only reason for the delay was that they had to go pick up all the bottles that the fans had thrown on the field, which allowed the refs to just have this drawn out conversation to all of a sudden say, no, we talked it through. You wouldn't have had time to talk it through had the fans not thrown all those bottles onto the field. And so I thought that was such a BS call to start with. It definitely wasn't holding, but you called it already, and it's not reviewable. I think that was a reaction to the outrage from the fans and the coaches and the players, and they reversed the call because they they based on the reaction, or maybe they saw a replay or whatever it was, they just reversed the call. But I thought that was such BS. You made the wrong call to start with, but that was the call on the field, and it's not a reviewable play. I heard Kirby talk about it, and I 100% agreed. For Georgia to respond after that was clearly like, what are we doing? And it did just feel like one of those nights where, and you're on the road, like a lot of things were going against you, early interceptions, a lot of calls going against us, big play, and then it gets called back. Like, for Georgia to be mentally strong enough to battle through that and still show up big with the momentum completely shifted after that, that was huge. So that was definitely just one of those just bizarre calls, and a staple from that game. But we do have to talk about the curious case of not Benjamin Button, but Carson Beck. Carson Beck was 23 of 41, threw for 175 yards, didn't throw any touchdowns, and threw 3 interceptions. This is the second time we've seen him in a big moment, in a big game, come out and just lay an egg. And not a lot, or some, like every interception isn't his fault. But he just seems to come out, and it was to a point in that game where every single time he threw the football, I was concerned. I just really just wanted Trevor. I was like, maybe we should just go to a wildcat offense and just snap the ball to Trevor Etienne and hope for the best. Because even some of the passes that weren't intercepted, it just felt like, whoa, he just throws it in tight traffic, and sometimes it works, and a lot of times it gets picked. And I think Kirk Herbstreit probably touched on this, where he was saying it must be a mental thing, or maybe a mental thing with him, with all these high expectations. This was a guy on the Heisman watch list coming into the season. He had super high expectations. And look at him. He's your prototypical quarterback. Super tall, has a good arm, can make every pass you want. And, he's just not been playing well this year. And Kirby touched on this as well. His ability to just remain unfazed. His ability to just go to the next play after a big interception, a big mistake, a fumble, whatever it is. He's able to just come back on the field, and according to Kirby, he's just unfazed. And I do think that is a necessary attribute for a quarterback. I'll pause and let that rest by itself. The other side of that is cute, but we cannot continue to bank on that, right? Like, we, in the Alabama game, we came back, and it was historical, and it was its own moment. But you can't think that, oh, well, we at least we have a quarterback who's going to move to the next play, because that's not normal. Usually, and we still lost the game, but usually when you're up 28-0, the game ends in a blowout. Like, you don't come back and make it competitive, right? Usually when a quarterback throws 3 interceptions, you're going to lose the game, especially 2 in like the first quarter, first half or whatever. He's just been playing just bad. I don't know what it is with him. And I have lost a lot of trust in him throwing the football. And, a lot of these are drops too. These receivers have to catch the football. That's another. You got to help them out. But some of the throws, again, some of them aren't even interceptions, but they're like you're bracing and flinching when he throws it, because It's in tight windows. It's behind the player. It's too high. It's just all over the place. But then again, after that big bizarre penalty overturned call and Texas scores and the fans are just losing their mind and you're on the road, and I believe we were backed up after that, and he comes back and responds when we really really needed it, because if we didn't, it was going to be ugly after that, because just all the momentum was going to Texas side and our offense was so flat. So his ability to do that is huge, but at some point he has to put it together. It can't be started off slow, we're behind, I'm not playing up to my ability, but next play. I love that you have that attribute, Carson, but come on, man. We can't keep playing with fire like this, right? Like, you are a great quarterback. You need to play with that confidence, and it's got to start showing. We can't expect 0 touchdowns and 3 interceptions to take us to the promised land. You gotta step up and play a complete game, because that's what it's gonna call for. We're still in the regular season. You may be able to get away with these things now, but when it is win or go home, and now an expanded playoff, man, that's we can't have it. So again, just another exciting game for Georgia and great win, but still concerns there. I'm glad we won, but it was definitely on the back of Trevor Etienne and our defense. There was nothing besides that drive where he responded when we really needed it. There was nothing that Carson Beck did in that game that made me say, "Oh, okay, like he's good now." Absolutely not. So still big concerns there. And then overall, there's just this unpredictability with Georgia. And the question is, can you trust them? We moved up to number 2 in the rankings this week, but it's just like, what Georgia are you going to get? The week before this, like I said, we were in a close game at one point, and then an uncomfortably close game towards the end after being up 31-10 to Mississippi State. Folks, Mississippi State has won 1 game this year. I have no idea who it was against. They won 1 game. And we beat Kentucky, who is 3-4, and obviously a good physical team, but they're 3-4. We beat them by a point. I don't know what Georgia we're going to get, which makes me, like, when I look forward, it's like, wow, well, we took down Texas, should have beaten Alabama, but you could also argue we should have lost to Kentucky. Like, I just don't know what to expect, and I'm happy with the win, but it's not a relief. Georgia, and here's a great way to put it. Georgia could go beat the number 1 team in the country this week and then go lose to Florida. Like, their ceiling is best team in the country, and their floor is we missed the playoffs. It's just all up to what Georgia we're going to get. We don't know till Saturday when the ball kicks off, and it's like, all right, here we go. That is not something we are accustomed to in the Kirby Smart era. And, it's just been a roller coaster year thus far. Very unpredictable. And I hope this is a more consistent team moving forward. I hope our defense plays like this moving forward. And I hope that Carson Beck can turn it around. But to answer if I can trust them, absolutely not. It is a toss up on what Georgia we're going to get week in and week out. And so that's Georgia. What do we make of Texas now? After that game, still a good football team, and still a great football team in my opinion. But we have to. It'll make us question, how do you all look against competition, and not the big name, but not really a threat competition, like the real competition. That game and that performance showed that Texas could go home in the first round. Like, if they don't make the top 4, they'll be in a first round matchup in this new college football playoff. And if you play the right team, because we know playoff basketball, football, whatever, it's matchup based. It is who you play. A team, it doesn't matter the rankings. That's the other thing about being in the playoffs. After the regular season is for, how good is that team? Can we beat them? Do you think we're good? Do you think we're better? When you get to the playoffs, everybody's good. Maybe that first round you play a 12th seed, maybe play a group of 5 team or something. But if you get the wrong matchup, you might be in trouble. And so that's just what it makes you question. Was this a bad game for Texas? Or, are they just going to beat up on inferior teams? Maybe teams with big names, or it looks good on paper, but we really know they don't have a chance, like your Oklahomas and Michigans. So more to be seen for Texas, but it definitely makes you say, how good are y'all? Because last week I was just in here raving about them. I didn't see this coming. And it's not that they lost, it was how they lost. Like they had that run, but they scored 15 points. This was a team who was rocking and rolling all season. So more to be seen, but definitely some questions now there for Texas. Let's look ahead for both teams. We got Georgia coming up. Georgia is on a bye week, a much needed bye week after a big game and a big win against number 1 Texas. But after that, we have Florida. The good old rivalry down there in Florida. And then we got another big road test, our last road game. I didn't realize that. That's our last road game, period, at Ole Miss. And then we finished the season off with Tennessee, Massachusetts, and Georgia Tech. So still some games to circle. Florida, tough team. They're without Graham Mertz now, but tough team in a rivalry game. At Ole Miss, I am not sleeping on them. I know they dropped all the way to 18 after having 2 early losses, but still a respectable team there. And then we all know Tennessee, that's going to be another marquee matchup there. Massachusetts, we shouldn't have a problem with that, and Georgia Tech will be more challenging than it's been in a long time. So still a tough road ahead for Georgia, but Texas was the biggest game on that schedule, and you won it after losing to Alabama. So that is a big resume builder there. And you do also have the win against Clemson. So looking good for Georgia, in a good position. We will definitely need a couple more big wins under our belt to feel comfortable with where our seeding may be for a college football playoff, but good position right now. And then looking forward to Texas. Listen, I'm right tuned back in again for them next week, because this is what I was kind of mentioning. Like, how good are you? Were you just beating teams because you were better than them and they had no chance? Or was it just an off night against Georgia and you're going to respond? Because this week you got Vanderbilt. And this is your first time. This is your first loss. And this is your first time dealing with any adversity this season. And so, and you're going against a Vanderbilt team with all the confidence in the world. And boy, if you think they're going to back down, you got another thing coming. They just knocked off Alabama. They gave Missouri all they could have in a overtime and maybe double overtime game. And they believe they can beat you. Oh yeah, and it's in Vanderbilt. So they want to be the big team slayers, and they're going to give Texas everything they can handle in a road game. Again, welcome to the SEC, Texas. So yeah, Vandy upcoming, and then they got Florida, Arkansas, Kentucky, and Texas A&M to end the season. Two big games I'm circling there are Vanderbilt this weekend, and then end of the season at Texas A&M. So again, more to come, more to be seen, but a great matchup against Georgia and Texas, and Georgia definitely surprised, and I couldn't be happier. Moving on to Alabama and Tennessee. Alabama falls to Tennessee 24-17. That was a great matchup there. A road test I was looking forward to for Alabama. Wanted to see how they responded to their first big road test of the season. I remember saying after that Georgia game, it's like, oh, it's all fun when you're at home, but when you have to go into the hostile environment, it's a little different. In the words of Bankroll Fresh, but recently in the words of Kirk Cousins, you got to walk in your trap and take over your trap. You know what I'm saying? And Alabama fell short of it. This was a very defensive game. It was just tough to score for either team to start. I believe it was 7-0 at half. Alabama was up. And then it was just a back and forth second half. Tennessee was just able to ultimately make the bigger plays there when they absolutely needed it. So big win for Tennessee. Another loss for Alabama. And let's just look overall at the season so far for Alabama. They beat the snot out of Western Kentucky to open the season, as they should have. And then they had signs, and I guess it's a bit of foreshadowing looking at it now. They had signs of struggles against South Florida, but eventually they pulled away 42-16. And then they played their first road game. I don't know if I would call it a test, but they played at Wisconsin and beat them 42-10. Mind you, in that game, Wisconsin lost their starting quarterback in the first drive, in the first possession. So they immediately had to adjust, and it was just no match from there. We had the classic Georgia-Alabama game. We all know the story. We talked about it here again. Up 28-0, ended up losing the lead, but had a miraculous play by Ryan Williams to win that. But could have been a loss. And then the very next week they did lose after moving up to number 1. They lost to Vandy on the road, as we know. And then they had a scare against South Carolina, where it's a game that South Carolina, I talked about this last week. They had every opportunity to win it. They had multiple opportunities to beat Alabama. They should have beaten Alabama, but they fell short. Alabama was able to pull it out, and then they lose a tough road game against Tennessee. And looking forward, they have Missouri this weekend. So I mean, I said it last week that this could be a 3-3 team. Now I guess 3-4. Like, I mean, Alabama is lucky to be 5-2 right now, and that's not great. I know they're not happy with being 5-2. I know Tide fans are upset about that, but man, that is a blessing because it could be a lot worse. It could be an unranked team right now, and so they have an opportunity here to get things back on track. We got Missouri coming up, and then LSU after that. If you can find a way to win both of those games, you know, I think you put yourself back into the conversation, especially if you can beat LSU in LSU. So all hope not lost. But I had questions about the Alabama defense. I think it's clear now. I mean, they did play better this week, but Alabama just overall not as great of a team as we're used to seeing. So that's what Alabama has coming up, and I do think that they can recover, but we'll see. And then Tennessee, what is up next for them after their big Alabama win? They do have a bye week this week as well, and then they go and play Kentucky at home, and you got Mississippi State. Tennessee has a pretty comfortable schedule. Can't sleep on Kentucky. Kentucky's already shown that they can beat and compete with good teams. I think that's actually going to be a really good game. So they'll have to show up for that one. I think they'll handle Mississippi State. And then they got at Georgia. So that'll be the next huge test for Tennessee. Tough road game for them. And then they end the season at Vanderbilt. Another tough game, road game for them. So they do have some tests, but besides that Georgia game, they're all very, very winnable games. You should beat Kentucky, should beat Mississippi State, UTEP. They'll win that game, and then they play at Vandy, winnable game. So Tennessee in a good position. One loss against Arkansas on the road, but they're in good position. I do again think that their offense isn't as high flying as we thought it was originally, but they do have a good defense, and I think they can compete with anybody. Very, very good team out there in Tennessee. And then we have to talk Miami versus Louisville. Miami was able to defeat Louisville 52-45. Folks, this is a college football game, not basketball. They haven't started up quite just yet, at least not the regular season. But yes, Miami beat Louisville 52-45. Another shootout for Miami. They won the football game. It was back and forth. I think they won a little more comfortably than the score may suggest as well. I think that might have been a late score by Louisville. But my question is Miami's shootouts, are these sustainable? Are these sustainable for the Hurricanes? We know that their offense is explosive, and they have a Heisman candidate right now, and they're going to score a bunch of points, but obviously they're out there to outscore you, not to really stop you. I think that was brought to light in the Virginia Tech game. They were crushing teams before that, and then Virginia Tech gave them a challenging game, which was my first glimpse of, that defense might not be as strong as I thought. And now it's clear. So now it's just we're just going to score more points than you. Good luck stopping us. The answer is no. That is not sustainable. You're going to face a team eventually, and I honestly don't think they have it on their schedule. They are going to be in the college football playoff but they don't have a team that really scares you, or that can really challenge them like that. I think it wouldn't happen until the playoffs. They just beat Louisville, and then they beat, or I'm looking for it, but I'm pretty sure they're going to beat Florida State. And then they have Duke, who you can't overlook, but I think they're going to outscore Duke. And then at Georgia Tech, that should be a good game. Georgia Tech is, again, no pushover this year, but looking at what Notre Dame was able to do against them, Georgia Tech is pretty good, but I don't know if they have enough to stop that Miami offense. And then they have Wake Forest, who they should beat, and Syracuse, kind of similar to Georgia Tech, good team, but don't know if they can stop them. No ranked teams left for Miami, and come to think of it, it doesn't look like Miami has a ranked team on their schedule. So that's something to be said. I think it's sustainable for the regular season, but I fear that they will have a rude awakening. Again, I keep saying the playoffs are so matchup based. If they get the wrong matchup, it could be good night first round. And that's if they don't get the bye week, of course. But I think it's good right now. They're high flying and great, but I don't think that's sustainable for a championship. For the regular season, yes. There's just nobody that scary on your schedule. So we'll see how things shape up with Miami. And then lastly, going to Colorado, they crushed Arizona 34-7. And listen, folks, it is time. It is time. It is time. I've been waiting. We've been saying we got to see more. We got to see more. I've seen enough. It's time to reevaluate how we're looking at Colorado and this season. Ever since the Nebraska game, they have looked like a formidable team. They obviously show up big time on the road, especially since that game against Nebraska. Deion spoke to enjoying it and embracing that. They have that swagger and confidence that I'm sure he instills in them. But we got to start looking at this team a little more seriously. Like we were hoping for. I thought it was a success for Deion if he could get this team from the one win that he inherited to a 4-win team to now we make a bowl. I thought it was important for them to make a bowl this year. I thought that was really important. They're now 1 win away from that and showing no signs of stopping. I just think they are a dangerous team that teams may be, I don't know if they keep coming in underestimating, thinking this is going to be a repeat of last year, but it's not looking like that at all. This team can come out there and win games, and if you're inferior, they're going to expose you. You cannot play around with this team, man, and they just keep responding. I keep saying it. I've been saying it for a long time. That defense is better than what people are giving them credit for. I'm telling you. And Arizona, they're a 3-3 team, but they had games last year where it was teams that were like middle of the road or bad, and it was going to be a competition against Colorado. This year, they've shown that they've taken a leap. If you can't hang with them, they're going to show you. And they did exactly that with Arizona. And so they're proving a lot of people wrong. I remember the saying with somebody, I don't know if they said October or November, Colorado would be irrelevant. We're still waiting. We're still waiting. So I think, again, this is a team you cannot keep underestimating. Can Colorado crack the top 25? I think undoubtedly. I think absolutely. Matter of fact, if they would have beaten, I mean, they were close to it. Kansas State is a decent team, but if they would have beaten Kansas State, they would have been in the top 25. And some of these big games that we were anticipating it being a thing, or like a one of those matchups, they've kind of fallen off. Like, I think if Colorado is at 5 wins right now, Cincinnati will be a tough game. Texas Tech at Texas Tech should be a tough game as well. But those last 3 games, Utah, Kansas, and Oklahoma State, you like Colorado's chances. That's 8 wins right there. If they can pull that out, that's 8 wins, and that's giving you Cincinnati and Texas Tech, who Colorado can beat. Like, there's no team, and the Big 12 is just not a conference where there's just anybody like that you're fearful of, the maybe BYU, and they avoid these teams. So Texas Tech and Cincinnati, we give you those games, but Colorado could be a 8, 9, 10 win team this season, which would be incredible. And I think it would be tough not to put them in the top 25 after that. I think they need one more big win. If they can find a way to beat Cincinnati, Texas Tech, they need a statement win, and their schedule doesn't offer. There are no ranked teams on here anymore, on their schedule anymore. But if they can just find a way to keep being consistent, maybe win out, they could crack the top 25. But it's bigger than that. I think Colorado has impressed. They've proven a lot of people wrong. Games people thought they were going to get destroyed, they come out and destroy the team or win the game. So very, very impressed with Colorado, and I hope they keep it up. Rooting for Coach Prime and that team out there in Boulder. Go Buffs. And let's go to the top 25. We had a few changes, obviously. New number 1 alert. Where are my Oregon fans? Oregon is the new number 1 team in the country. They deserve it. They deserve it, absolutely. They're a darn good team. I talked about they need to be careful after such a big emotional win against Ohio State. And then you got Purdue coming in the next week. And they took care of business, beat them 35-0. I think Oregon has just gotten better week by week. And they deserve to be the number 1 team in the country. I was wondering, like, if they were going to give it to Georgia with how Georgia beat Texas. But I mean, I think you gotta give it to Oregon for the time being. So big jump for Oregon, or not a big jump, but a big win for Oregon there to now be the new number 1, and then jump for Georgia up to number 2 this week after taking down the former number 1 Texas. And then Tennessee is back in the top 10. They were just outside of it at 11, and are now back up to 7. So a big win there for Tennessee against Alabama, of course. And then Clemson at the number 9 slot. You gotta love it. Clemson is that team that nobody wants to play right now. Nobody wants to go against that Clemson team. Their offense looks high-powered, and I'll go as far as to say that Georgia-Clemson game would go a little different if it happened today. And this is coming from a Georgia fan. I think they found their offense. That was the first game of the season, and they didn't have it all together yet. And playing Georgia is different, of course, but that may go a little different today. They look high-powered, and again, everybody, if you can, you want to stay out of their way. And then last big one was Alabama. They drop to 15 this week. Huge drop, and obviously not used to seeing that logo that far down. That was shocking not shocking that they fell that far. I mean, it was bound to happen after that loss, but just shocking where the program is today. Clearly not the same team, and I think an appropriate ranking at this point in time. But like I said, not over for Alabama, but kind of just speaks to the season they've had this year. So those were the big things of the top 25. And we will end it with the must-see TV games. Folks, this is firstborn. I don't care. I got to see this game. This is, oh my gosh, I need to rush my wife to the hospital. She can wait. These are the must-see TV games this week. I touched on this earlier. Texas at Vanderbilt. Got to see it. I need to see it. On paper, it is, Texas should take care of that, but thought the same thing against Georgia, right? And again, how does Texas deal with adversity? How does Texas play teams in the SEC? How are they going to play on the road now after that type of win or after that type of loss? That'll be very interesting to see. So I have that game circled, must see. And then we got Syracuse at Pitt. That should be a good matchup for Syracuse. I just like Syracuse. I like how they play. I think they're an underrated team, a scary team to go against, and that'll be a good road test for them. And then we got Nebraska at Ohio State. Nebraska got crushed the other week. I forget who did it, but I think it was Indiana maybe. Lost like 56-7 or something crazy. So how does Nebraska respond? And Ohio State had a bye week after their loss to Oregon, I believe. So how do they respond? And Nebraska is a solid team, not your same old Nebraska. I mean, they have some pieces, still got a ways to go, but they have some pieces. So that should be an interesting game for both teams. And then Illinois at Oregon. Oregon's first game at number 1. And going up against an Illinois team who beat Nebraska earlier in a hostile environment. So I'm sure they'll come in there with some confidence. I think Oregon should take care of that game, but it should be an interesting game. Should be a good challenge. And then Missouri at Alabama. Alabama has to respond here and get a hold of things. We'll see their mental toughness and see if they can respond. They'll be at home, so should be comfortable. But Missouri is not as good this year. Not as impressed with Missouri as I was last year. I thought obviously had a much better team last year, but I think it'll be a good matchup for Alabama. Can you put that team away? What's the gap? Like, are you down there with Missouri, or are you better? Like, how good or how bad is Alabama? And it'll be a little pressure for Alabama to go up against them. I think if you get that third loss, you may be flirting with falling out of the top 25, especially against a team ranked under you, or you're just gonna fall really, really low. So they kind of need this game, and then after that you got LSU after this game. So man, they need a big response. So opportunity. This is an opportunity to get back in it. It's the reason why I said Alabama can recover. So that should be a good game. That'll definitely be circled for me. And then finally, LSU at Texas A&M. We all know how difficult it is to play at Texas A&M. Big road test for LSU. I feel like every game LSU has is down to the wire. And this will be one of their biggest challenges yet, if not their biggest. So that should be a really, really good matchup. Can't really call who wins that game, but should be great. And that wraps it up for week 9. Some great games to take a look at this weekend. And then we had a great weekend of college football this past weekend, with Georgia highlighting that with their win over Texas. So excited for the week to come. Folks, again, I appreciate you joining us as always. I'll end it with, if you are not subscribed, please make sure you go subscribe and follow us on our socials, TikTok and Instagram. But thanks for joining. Hope you enjoyed the show. We have the NFL and the NBA is back. So we'll have those episodes coming out shortly. But thanks again for joining, and we'll see you next week.